I'm Nima Rajan. The federal party leaders continue to campaign full speed ahead as the election enters its last week. Both Conservative leader Erin O'Toole and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh were in Ontario today. Mr. Singh was in the province's northwest, while Mr. O'Toole stayed close to his adopted headquarters in Ottawa. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau made an announcement scheduled during his visit to Vancouver today, and Canadians head to the polls on September 20th. Police in London, Ontario say a 25-year-old man has been charged for allegedly throwing gravel at Liberal leader Justin Trudeau during a campaign stop. Police say Shane Marshall of St. Thomas faces one count of assault with a weapon. Earlier this week, the People's Party of Canada said it removed a man named Shane Marshall from the post of Elgin Middlesex London Riding Association president. 145 Afghans who are at risk of retribution by the Taliban will soon be on their way to Canada. A spokesman for Immigration Minister Marco Mendicino says the group of refugees have fled to Pakistan and will be on their way to Canada within days or weeks. Their number includes individuals associated with the Malala Foundation, students at the Marifat Girls' School, and fixers who helped Canadian journalists covering the mission. An organization calling itself Canadian Frontline Nurses posted notices of silent vigils expected to take place in all 10 provinces. Demonstrators are expected to target hospitals across the country with protests against COVID-19 health restrictions and the prospect of proof of vaccination systems. Prospective locations include the Winnipeg Health Sciences Centre, Toronto General Hospital, and the Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre in Halifax. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization says people who are immunocompromised should receive a third shot of a COVID-19 vaccine. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Teresa Tam says the advice applies to people 12 and older whose immune systems are compromised for a variety of reasons. This includes those being treated for a tumor or having an untreated HIV infection that has advanced. Students at two nations in Manitoba are headed back to school a year behind due to COVID-19 outbreaks during the last school year. Educators on Shamattawa First Nation, northeast of Winnipeg, made the decision to have students repeat the previous year. Chief Eric Redhead says the community was unable to use virtual learning because the internet connection there was too unreliable. Some students at Pimachikamak Cree Nation, also known as Cross Lake, will also be repeating the school year after the school was shut down due to a COVID-19 outbreak. A state-owned Chinese telecommunications firm is asking the federal court to set aside the recent decision directing it to divest its stake in a Canadian subsidiary. The Liberal government issued the direction to China Mobile International Canada, citing national security concerns. CMI Canada says the government has no grounds to believe the company would compromise security and says the move is politically motivated. Communities across the country commemorated the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terror attacks. Events were held in multiple cities to pay tribute to those who died. This while also honoring the endurance of the human spirit in the face of such horror. 24 Canadians were among the almost 3,000 people killed. 34 passenger planes and 4 military planes were diverted that day to Gander, Newfoundland and Labrador, increasing the town's population by 6,600. Amazon Canada is set to look for 15,000 warehouse and distribution workers from coast to coast this fall. The e-commerce giant currently has 25,000 Canadian employees, but it is expanding rapidly due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting online shopping boom. Amazon now has 46 warehouse and delivery facilities in Canada, compared with 30 in mid-2020. But it notes the number is expected to grow, with new announcements coming later this year. Two movie theater titans are taking a dispute to court. Toronto-based Cineplex is seeking to recoup $2.18 billion in damages from Cineworld Group plc. This after the UK theater giant walked away from the December 2019 takeover deal amid strict economic lockdown measures in 2020. They were alleging material adverse effects and breaches by Cineplex. Cineplex has called Cineworld's decision to terminate the deal nothing more than a case of buyer's remorse. Well, the future is bright for Canadian tennis sensation Leylah Fernandez. The 19-year-old from Laval, Quebec, lost the U.S. Open final to Britain's Emma Raducanu yesterday, but she wants to show the world her magical run was no fluke. The Canadian beat top players like Naomi Osaka, Angelique Kerber, and Aryna Sabalenka on her way to the final. All right, stay with us. When we come back, we will take a look at campaign spending promises by the major federal political parties. This as the election campaign enters its fifth and final week. An interview with Franco Terrazzano of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation coming up next. That and, of course, more news from around the world only on Forum Daily. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. It's the fifth and final week of the federal election campaign, and the issue of spending has become more central ahead of the September 20th election. The NDP is promising to pay for social programs by taxing the super rich and ultra-profitable corporations. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau suggests there's a ceiling to how much a government can tax the wealthy and that his party's methods are better. However, number crunchers say there's only so much space for new spending before deficits become a problem. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is pledging to balance the budget within a decade, but Parliamentary Budget Officer Kevin Page warns that the Conservative pledge to boost health transfers to the provinces could put the balanced budget target at significant risk. Well, joining us now to help us break down all these numbers is Mr. Franco Terrazzano, the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So let's start with the spending promises of the NDP. Can you tell us a little bit more on their proposal to apply new taxes on the highest income tax brackets? And more importantly, if this plan would cover all of their spending pledges?
Well, the NDP wants to raise income taxes on top earners, wants to raise business taxes, capital gains taxes, and impose a wealth tax and excess profits tax. But the NDP wants to spend so much money that even after all of these tax hikes, they still have no clue how they would balance the budget. And the NDP wants Canadians to think that it will just be the wealthy or big businesses that end up paying for these tax hikes. But the truth of the matter is that it'll be everyday Canadians who feel the pain of these taxes through higher prices at the till and through fewer job opportunities.
All right, sir. Well, meanwhile, we have the Conservatives promising to balance the budget within a decade. Can you go over their plan to achieve that?
Well, the Conservatives are the only major party that's promising to balance the budget. So a little bit of credit there, but even their plan is not credible. Essentially, O'Toole is hoping that the economy will balance the budget. But what if reality isn't that rosy, right? What if interest rates spike? What if Canada's economy stumbles into another downturn? So if that were the case, would O'Toole actually find some savings, or would he just let the debt continue to balloon?
And we know the PBO has also raised concerns around the Conservative pledge. Can you expand on some of the criticism that this promise has received?
Well, the Conservatives want to increase spending by about $50 billion on top of the Liberal government's last budget, right? That was a huge spending budget. But we also have to remember that according to PBO data, the current trajectory wouldn't see the federal government's budget balanced until 2070. So essentially, O'Toole wants to spend billions of dollars more, but thinks he can balance the budget decades sooner. So something isn't adding up there.
All right, sir, just about 2.5 minutes left here, but let's jump to the Liberal Party platform in terms of taxation and balancing the budget.
Well, the Liberals want to spend about $78 billion more. So we're hearing more borrowing coming from the Liberals, but we're not hearing a peep on when they would balance the budget. So we have to look at Trudeau's track record. He said the books would balance themselves. Well, that didn't happen. He also told Canadians in 2015 that he would balance the budget in 2019. Well, that didn't happen either. So you look at Trudeau's track record and you look at this Liberal platform, and it's a good bet that the Liberals will never balance the budget.
All right, sir. Just about 1.5 minutes left here. But what are each of the main federal parties promising overall in terms of new spending?
Well, what we're hearing from all the major spendings is parties is billions of dollars in new spending. And you really have to look at that in the context of pre-pandemic spending. So in 2018, the federal government brought per person spending to all-time highs, which essentially means that the Trudeau government in 2018, before the pandemic, was spending more than what the federal government did in any single year during World War II. So given that context, we should be able to see all parties finding some savings, but we're really not seeing that at all.
All right, sir. So why is it so important for the next government to prioritize balancing the budget and addressing the federal debt?
Well, it's about affordability, right? Already, the federal government is more than $1 trillion in debt, which means that each Canadian is on the hook for about $30,000 in federal government debt alone. And if these politicians don't save money, one way or another, that would have to come from Canadians. But look, a lot of Canadians are also worried about what type of nation they're leaving to future generations. Under the status quo, we wouldn't see a balanced budget until 2070, and that would push up federal government debt per person to about $67,000. So that would be a huge tab that we would be leaving to Canadians' kids and grandkids to pay back.
All right, sir, just really quickly, does the CTF have any resources for taxpayers who may be interested in this issue?
Yes, please go to taxpayer.com, go to our newsroom, and you'll see our 2021 taxpayer guide to the federal election.
All right, sir, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we'll take a look at stories from across the country. British Columbia's new vaccine card system takes effect, and protesters marched in Calgary over COVID-19 restrictions. We'll have these stories and more coming up after the break on Forum Daily, so stay tuned. British Columbia's COVID-19 vaccine card system is now in effect as the province aims to curtail cases and hospitalizations in the fourth wave of the pandemic. Anyone who wants to access a range of non-essential indoor settings must show proof of at least one dose of vaccine, with a second shot required by October 24th. The digital or paper vaccine card is required at settings such as ticketed sporting events, concerts, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, casinos, gyms, and movie theaters. The card will not be required at grocery and liquor stores, pharmacies, fast food restaurants, salons, hotels, banks, retail stores, food banks, and shelters. The BC government says it is expanding its list of items that are eligible for recycling and will now include electric vehicle batteries, mattresses, single-use fuel canisters, and fire extinguishers. The government says this expansion means that these items will be collected for free. It says other items added to the list include solar panels, more types of lithium-ion batteries, electric vehicle chargers, and e-cigarettes. The government says this regulation strategy generates about $500 million annually through recycling programs. A large group of demonstrators in Calgary's Olympic Plaza joined hands in a protest yesterday against the city's vaccine mandate for its employees and against provincial public health restrictions. According to the City of Calgary, employees without religious or health exemption who are not fully vaccinated by October 31st will be disciplined and could be fired. The rally finished up with a march through the streets of downtown Calgary. Similar protests are also planned across the province on Wednesday. A fire has destroyed a southeast Saskatchewan business whose owner says he couldn't afford insurance due to lost income because of the pandemic. Dale Orsted says the blaze at the Moosehead Inn in Kenosi Lake broke out late Friday night, and the cause has yet to be confirmed. He says the business had been struggling to stay afloat since reopening its doors just 3 months ago. Mr. Orsted says he will clean up the property with the intention to sell it. Manitoba's education minister has announced the people who will make up an advisory panel that will design the framework for an updated provincial curriculum. The 20-person list announced by Cliff Cullen includes students, parents, educators, and other stakeholders. The framework will identify underlying principles of the kindergarten to grade 12 curriculum and establish its overall structure. The curriculum will replace the existing one, which dates back to 1995. The Winnipeg Police Service says a spike in the number of protests, including anti-mask and anti-COVID-19 vaccine rallies, has taken a toll on police staffing. Superintendent Dave Delal says such events have the potential to become volatile as people's emotions run high. He says so far this year, officers have been deployed to 110 events, and that social media has made it much easier for rallies to be held. He told the Winnipeg Police Board yesterday that such events put a strain on the ability of police to respond to calls for service in the community. The anti-vaccine group Canadian Frontline Nurses plans to hold silent vigils outside hospitals at all 10 provinces today to protest COVID-19 public health measures. It says it wants to take a stand against, quote, tyrannical measures and government overreach. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is condemning the protests as selfish, cowardly, and reckless. This while the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario and Ontario Medical Association are calling for designated safe zones around healthcare facilities. In-person classes at an elementary school in Charlottetown have been shut down for the upcoming week following an outbreak of COVID-19. 17 other schools in the area surrounding the PEI capital have also had their classes canceled for at least 3 days. This is to allow for investigation and contact tracing. The province's chief medical officer of health says 10 of the last 11 cases on the island have involved people under the age of 19. Nearly 93,000 salmon have died as a result of a problem at an aquaculture facility in Newfoundland and Labrador. The Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Agriculture says the abnormal salmon mortality event occurred at Maui's Marine Harvest, Atlantic Canada, on the province's south coast. Under Newfoundland and Labrador's aquaculture regulations, abnormal mortality of over 10% must be publicly reported. Officials say the event resulted from sudden low dissolved oxygen levels at the farm site. Well, it's been a busy weekend for Newfoundland power crews as they work to get the lights back on following a visit from Hurricane Larry. Thousands of residents were left in the dark when the Category 1 storm knocked out countless trees and branches, which took out power lines across the province's southeast. Larry lashed St. John's and surrounding areas on Friday night and into Saturday. And at the peak, about 61,000 residents were without power. All right, we'll be right back after the break with a look at stories from around the world, including new U.S. studies that show vaccines are effective against COVID-19. North Korea says it successfully test-fired new long-range missiles. And the Taliban says women can study in universities. We'll have these stories and more when we come back. Three new U.S. studies show COVID-19 vaccines are highly effective against COVID-19 hospitalizations and death. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says those who are not vaccinated are 4.5 times more likely to be infected, more than 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die of the virus. However, the agency says the data shows protection against COVID is slipping for some people as time passes since their last dose, with protection at 91% in the spring, but falling to 78% in June and July. North Korea says it successfully test-fired newly developed long-range cruise missiles over the weekend. The Korean Central News Agency says the cruise missiles successfully hit targets some 1,500 kilometers away on Saturday and Sunday. The missiles had been under development for 2 years. The higher education minister in the new Taliban government says women can study in universities, including at postgraduate levels. But classrooms will be gender segregated and dress code is compulsory. The new policies come after Afghanistan's new rulers formed an all-male, all-Taliban government. The announcement came as a diplomatic delegation from Qatar arrived in the Afghan capital. This was the highest level delegation to visit since the Taliban announced their interim cabinet. Meanwhile, top ministers from India and Australia have called for international anti-terror efforts in Afghanistan. This would bolster mutual security ties and blunt China's growing regional assertiveness. Australia's foreign and defense ministers met their Indian counterparts on Saturday in New Delhi, which is the second stop on a four-nation tour. Australia and India are members of the Quad Regional Alliance along with Japan and the U.S. Guinea's longtime opposition leader says he welcomes the coup that deposed President Alpha Condé. But Cellou Dalein Diallo is calling on the junta leaders to create a transitional government and a timeline for elections as soon as possible. Mr. Diallo, who also lost to Mr. Condé in the last 3 presidential polls, accused the deposed president of betraying his oath and creating the crisis that led to his demise. Japan can now give Vietnam defense equipment and technology under an agreement signed by the two countries on Saturday. They're stepping up military cooperation amid worries about China's growing military influence. Japan's defense ministry said it plans to deepen defense ties through multinational joint exercises and other means. The ministry said details about the transfer of specific equipment, including naval vessels, will be worked out in subsequent talks. Barely a month in office, Malaysia's new leader has won opposition support as parliament reopens. Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob signed a cooperation pact with the main opposition bloc led by Anwar Ibrahim. In exchange for reforms, the opposition says it will not seek to undermine Mr. Ismail's government ahead of elections due in 2 years. Both sides say their cooperation will restore political stability to fight the COVID-19 pandemic and revive the economy. In a blitz of TV ads and a last-minute rally, California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom urged voters to defeat a looming recall that could remove him from office. Meanwhile, leading Republican contender Larry Elder broadly criticized the media for what he described as double standards that insulated Mr. Newsom from scrutiny throughout the contest. The vote concludes on Tuesday. Two politicians are formally throwing their hats in the ring to become France's first female president in the next year's spring election. National Rally's Marine Le Pen and Paris's socialist mayor Anne Hidalgo both officially launched their campaigns on Sunday. Centrist incumbent Emmanuel Macron is expected to announce his re-election bid soon. Britain's health secretary says authorities have decided not to require vaccine passports for entry into nightclubs and other crowded events in England. That marks a reversal amid opposition from some of the Conservative government supporters in Parliament. Minister Sajid Javid says they could reconsider the decision if COVID-19 cases rise exponentially once again. Epic Games says it will appeal a judge's decision in its lawsuit claiming that Apple is running a monopoly with its App Store. U.S. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez rejected the claim by the maker of the popular game Fortnite, but she did order Apple to drop the requirement that payment for any app or service on an iPhone or iPad be paid for through the App Store. Canada's Immigration Minister, Marco Mendicino, says a Toronto property developer is a shining example of Canadian compassion. Ways Habibzai, who fled to Canada from Afghanistan in 1992 after his house was destroyed by a rocket, has launched a personal aid effort. This is to provide clothes and other necessities for refugees who escaped Kabul. The Afghan-Canadian businessman has turned conference rooms in refugee hotels into repositories for clothing and necessities. He also recruited dozens of people to volunteer as translators and help fund the aid effort. I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily.